Struggled all week with this letter, and it's still not right. It's just Sunday, and I've got to press send. For me, this past week has been an all-consuming pressure cooker infusion of emotions. As someone who was born and lived most of my adult life in the U.S., I felt hope and outrage and grief and energy, movement. And as someone who doesn't live there anymore, I've felt powerless and distant, disconnected and out of position. I've listened to friends tell me about their experiences, talk about what we can personally do to take on racism in our communities and our relationships. Looked hard in the mirror. The things I'm doing right and the things I still have a lot of work to go on. I've wrestled with what to share with all of you. See, most of you, about 70% of the people who read and watch these letters, aren't from the US. Now, you've seen the news stories, of course, but in most of your communities, COVID-19 is still the major story. Here in New Zealand, it's that we've gotten rid of COVID-19, and now we're trying to figure out how to handle massive unemployment and the collapse of our most important industry, tourism. And then I look in the mirror, and I see my face and my skin staring back. I know how that's tilted the scales all through my life and my travels. I think about all the perspectives this group shares, about trying to connect to people who still think all lives matter. And if this is you, as a personal favor to me, please read a link in the description. It's a piece I wrote a few years ago. And then write back to me if you still want to talk. I think about connecting to folks who have different world experiences than I do and trying to elevate those stories and get myself out of the way. I think about those of you for whom June 4th, Tiananmen Square was the most salient and difficult part of this week. I've learned over the years of writing these letters that the best thing I can do is generally to stick to my own experience. So here are mine. I grew up in the U.S. to an all-white family on a collection of Air Force bases. Diversity was not a big feature of my life growing up. We lived in pretty white places. I think a couple of times my friend groups had kids with different skin colors, but there wasn't a lot of cultural diversity. When I was in my early 20s, I remember having a conversation with my then girlfriend about how the U.S. didn't really have a culture. Now, she was an anthropologist and had had a much wider set of life experiences than I had, and insisted that I was wrong. There was definitely a white American culture. I just didn't see it. I cringe a lot when I remember that. We went to Peru that summer. We were working on an anthropological team, and it was my first time leaving the country and leaving my culture. I was never quite the same after that, in the best way. Fast forward a decade, and I'd started these travels. Nothing in my life has taught me about privilege, power, white American culture, and all the insidious ways racism hides, like travel. I've been so lucky to encounter so many patient people willing to help me unpack my own stories and start to make better ones. Along the way, I learned to stop using "you should" and start using "I should." So here's the I've got in this moment. I'm from a country built on the backs of black slaves. People who look like me have benefited for generations from systemic, intentional inequity baked into the system. Life is way, way easier as a white person, and especially as a white man. The system in America is broken and it needs fixed. People who look like me need to step up and fix it. Racism in America is a white person's problem. And white people like me just need to swallow hard, look themselves in the mirror, and get to work. And I just slipped into you should again. Because even though I'm staring at a US passport on the shelf over there, much of that work is out of reach for me. I don't live in the States. I don't have a city council or a congressperson I can call or write or advocate to for better policies or a fairer budget. I can't show up at protests or help out folks who do. It's been 6 years since I last lived in the US, and for the first time, I'm really feeling the disconnect. All of my information about what it's like there is second or third hand. It's a place that's woven so deeply into the fabric of who I am that it's never going to completely wash out. But it's not where I am now, and I'm not going back. So I look outside, out at the Waiheke Gulf, the rain clouds pressing eastward across the water. I'm reminded of the Maori waka, that first one that sailed in through that exact water, landing on Aotearoa, that island right there. Of the story here, one that's played out so differently and so similarly to the one I grew up with. The same outcomes here as in the States. Full prisons and empty houses. I'm trying to find my roots here, and the voice that will eventually come with them, knowing I have a lot more listening left before it'll be my time to talk. So I look back at this keyboard, this camera, talking to you. With words, all I've really got in this moment in my life to affect change. And a request. No matter where you are, there is racism in your own community. Please find it, name it, and fight it. It's going to take all of us together. Thank you.